I still see that frozen valley when I close my eyes. The night sits there like a weight, and the cold feels sharper in memory than it ever did on my skin. We were a 12-man ranger team dropped into the Alaska Triangle before dawn, told to find a missing weather crew and secure their gear. That was the official line. The real truth showed itself the moment our boots touched the snow. My compass drifted as if it had lost faith in north. The radio hissed in slow pulses, almost like breathing. The ground carried a low hum that rose through my soles and settled in my chest. I kept checking my watch to anchor myself. Time felt slippery out there, and I did not trust anything that was not made of steel or bone. We moved toward the dark shape of the silent station. Its roof sagged under fresh snow. Its windows stared back like empty eyes. I remember thinking the place looked less abandoned and more frightened, as if it had tried to pull itself into the earth before something reached it. That feeling stayed with me as we stepped inside and the cold closed behind us. Before we start the video, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. I was a young staff sergeant then, lean from cold marches and long nights, still trying to prove I belonged among men who had already seen more winters than I had years in service. Our small ranger-trained recon platoon lived out of sleds and tents across the Alaskan wild. We were used to silence, long shadows, and days when the sun barely bothered to rise. Even so, the land around the Alaska Triangle felt different the first time I set foot near it. Wild places usually carry some kind of rhythm. This one held only stillness, as if something watched and waited. Our orders for that patrol came in quiet tones. A weather outpost had missed 3 scheduled reports. A small Air Force team assigned to it had stopped responding. The brass said the old station was probably buried under snow or the antenna had snapped. Nothing dramatic, nothing strange. Yet the briefing room felt too crowded, even with only a major, an Air Force captain, and our lieutenant. They handed out copies of the map that left out more than it showed. Someone had gone through it with a black marker, covering certain grid lines instead of circling them. The major spoke in clip sentences. He told us it was a fast in and out. Secure the missing team. Recover sensitive equipment. We turned to base. No mention of danger beyond weather, but when he talked, he kept glancing at the sealed metal case on the table. Inside were the extra radios and a sensor pack we had never used before. They were heavier than they looked, wrapped in insulated cloth, and marked with a code none of us had seen. The captain reminded us to keep the gear powered at all times. He said it helped with signal stability. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. It sounded like he was repeating a line he did not fully trust. Rumors had been floating around the brigade for weeks, hunters gone missing, aircraft flying low over the triangle and never returning. A set of footprints found in the snow that ended in the middle of a clearing, as if the person had walked straight into the sky. I never put stock in campfire talk, but each story came with the same uneasy detail, radios that pulsed before it happened. We lifted off from the airfield on a ski-equipped plane before dawn. The cabin rattled as we climbed over the Alaska range, and frost crawled along the windows like white lace. I checked my gear twice. M14 clean and oiled, 6 magazines plus a bandolier of loose rounds, 1 fragmentation grenade, 1 smoke, 2 flares, standard cold weather load. I kept my compass around my neck and tapped it habitually, the way men touch a charm they do not admit they need. The pilot set us down on a frozen lake a few miles from the outpost. The air felt brittle when I stepped out. The cold bit through my gloves before I had taken 5 breaths. Mountains stood around the valley like walls, and the sky above them carried a thin green shimmer of aurora, even though the sun had not reached the horizon yet. That faint light made the snowfields look deeper than they were, as if the ground waited to open. We moved in a staggered line toward the station. Snowshoes cracked lightly against the crust. I kept checking my compass and felt a quiet jolt when the needle drifted left even though I faced the same bearing. I tapped it again, thinking ice had formed inside, but the needle kept sliding, searching for something that was not north. The outpost finally came into view as a dark shape ahead of us. It looked wrong from the first moment. The front door hung outward, not inward. Its hinges snapped as if something inside had pushed hard. A metal drum sat half buried in snow with deep scratches running down the side, too uniform for any tool I knew. The wind curled around the building but never seemed to enter it. That still air inside the doorway felt like an open mouth. The lieutenant signaled us forward. We entered in pairs, rifles up. The smell hit first, not rot, not blood. Something faint and metallic, like old wire warmed by a current and then cooled again. The lights were dead, but my torch beam picked up signs of struggle. papers scattered. A stool overturned. A heavy table cracked through the middle as if someone had put too much weight on it. What bothered me most was the lack of blood. If a fight had happened, it had been cleaned with strange care. Almost too clean. We found the last entries in the station log. The handwriting grew tighter toward the end. The line spoke of pressure in the walls, a sound inside the bones, a shape moving behind the snowdrift. Then the line stopped halfway through a sentence. No sign of a pen. No sign of the man who wrote it. The radio room looked as if someone had ripped the main set straight out of the mountain. Wires dangled like veins. The sensor array was gone. Only scorched marks remained where the equipment used to sit. My own radio hissed with a slow pulse, like someone breathing through the speaker. Every time it pulsed, the ground under my boots gave the same faint vibration. We stepped back outside just as the first streaks of morning reached the ridge. The cold felt heavier, as if it carried weight rather than temperature. I looked at the quiet valley, the broken door, and the shifting compass in my hand. Something old lived in that place, something patient. We had only just disturbed its morning. The lieutenant sent us to sweep the perimeter. That was when I noticed the prints in the snow. The prints caught my eye right away. They were large and spaced far apart, as if something tall had moved with long strides across the open snowfield behind the station. At first, I thought they might belong to a moose, but the shape was wrong. No clear hoof pattern. No clear claw marks either. Just deep oval impressions set in a rhythm that did not match any animal I knew. The strangest part was how they ended. The last print sat clean in the snow, and then nothing. No drag. No scatter. No lighter markings. It looked like whatever made them simply stepped upward into the empty air. We followed the trail until it reached a stand of thin trees near the northern slope. The bark carried long scratches, smooth and straight, far higher than a man could reach without climbing. The wood around those marks looked polished, not torn. My fingers traced a groove and felt it warm, even though the air was far below freezing. I pulled my hand back and wiped it on my pants without knowing why. We spread out and searched the ground. More odd signs appeared. A strip of torn fabric frozen into a low branch. A length of twisted metal half buried near a boulder, shaped like it had been softened and then bent by hand. Tracks from our missing weather team crossed the area, but then veered sharply, looping back toward the station in tight circles before stopping near a collapsed snowbank. It looked like they had run from something and changed direction more than once. Our lieutenant kept glancing at his private radio. It was the small encrypted set only officers carried. He held it close to his chest, as if he expected it to speak to him. I noticed he took notes in a thin black notebook whenever we found something unusual. He never shared what he wrote, and he never let the book out of his sight. I had served under him for 2 years, and this was the first time I had seen him guarded like that. We returned to the station before the light faded. The snow reflected the dim glow of the aurora, turning everything a pale green. It made the objects in the distance look closer than they were. That kind of light can trick a tired man, but this was different. Shapes flickered at the edges whenever I looked aside. When I turned to face them, nothing moved. We set camp close to the outpost, using the building as partial cover from the wind. Our tents formed a tight half circle. Cookstoves hissed quietly. The smell of heating rations drifted in the air. It felt almost normal for a moment. Then one of the men, a sergeant from the 2nd Squad, stopped mid-step and stared toward the ridge. He said he saw a tall, thin shape standing still against the aurora. When we raised our scopes, nothing showed there. But his face stayed pale long after he looked away. Night settled without warning. The cold always deepens fast in the north, but that evening it felt like someone had dropped a heavy curtain. The radio pulses grew sharper, rising every few minutes. I checked the battery pack twice. It worked fine. Yet the sound rolled through my ribs as if it came from the ground instead of the handset. We tried calling the missing team on all channels. No response. Only a burst of static that faded into a slow, steady pattern, almost like tapping. I lay in my sleeping bag and listened. The wind scraped lightly along the fabric of the tent. I kept thinking about the prints and the scratches on the trees. I pictured the torn fabric frozen to the branch, that strange warmth in the wood. A part of me tried to explain each detail, to fit them into things I understood. But each piece felt loose and out of place, like parts of a puzzle that could not form one picture. Just before dawn, a faint voice came over the radio. It used an old Air Force call sign, one that had been retired nearly a year earlier. The voice sounded thin and distant, but it spoke the exact names of the missing crew. It asked for help in plain words, then broke off as if someone had cut the line. Our comms man looked at me with eyes that did not blink. He said the signal matched the outpost frequency even though we already knew the equipment inside was gone. We broke camp with stiff hands. The lieutenant gathered us and announced new orders. Move deeper past the station toward an older crash site marked faintly on the map. None of us had heard about a crash. It had not been in the briefing, but he said the command wanted confirmation on the wreck and possible survivors. Survivors. That word rang hollow. The plane had gone down years earlier, according to the few notes we had. Still, we followed the route because that was our job. The deeper we moved, the more the land twisted under us. Trails that should have been straight bent slightly to the right. Hills rose where the map showed flat ground. A frozen creek cut through the valley in a direction opposite of what our compasses claimed. I checked my watch more often, counting each minute as if I could anchor myself by doing so. My breath frosted in short bursts. My pack straps cracked from the cold. Around midday, the radio gave another pulse, sharper than before. It echoed off the snow like a whisper turned inside out. Our corporal asked if maybe the storm ahead was interfering. Storm, I thought. The sky was clear a moment earlier. But when I looked again, a heavy white haze thickened over the ridge. Before we reached it, I knew something waited in that valley. Not a person, not an animal, something drawn toward our signals and our movement, as if it had been listening since we arrived, and the crash site was only the first step toward it. The haze rolled over us with strange speed. One moment the ridge ahead looked sharp and clear, and the next it blurred into a wide wall of drifting white. I had moved through many storms in Alaska, but they never formed that fast. Our point man lifted his hand, signaling a slow advance. Each step landed softer than the one before, as if the snow wanted to swallow the sound. My breath hung low in the air, barely rising. The cold pressed deeper through my layers until my fingers felt stiff around the rifle grip. We pushed into a stand of stunted trees scattered along a slope. Bare branches creaked above us. I kept my eyes on the ground, checking for tracks or signs of the missing crew. Snow lay untouched except for our own prints. That was why the sudden stop in our line hit me hard. Our point man did not signal. He did not call out. He simply was not there. His tracks ended mid-stride. A left print, a right print, and then empty snow. No scuffle. No change in depth. No drag marks. The slope held a cold silence that felt too deliberate. We called his name. The sound went nowhere. The trees stood still, their shadows stretched like thin fingers. The corporal spotted something in the branches above. A strip of cloth hung from a fork in the tree. Not snow gear. A piece of our point man's parka. Higher up, maybe 20 or 30 feet, his rifle lay wedged between branches, barrel bent nearly in half. Almost no blood stained the snow below. It looked like he had simply been lifted, crushed, and carried off in silence. That kind of sight can shake even a steady man. It shook all of us. The lieutenant ordered a quick perimeter search. We spread out, rifles raised, nerves stretched tight. The haze thickened, closing in from both sides. My breath felt thin. My boots sank deeper with each step, though the snow had been firm moments earlier. I scanned left and right, expecting movement. None came. What we did find were more prints, but these were not from boots. Large oval impressions pressed into the snow, spaced far wider than a man's stride. Some prints overlapped the ones we made earlier, as if something had followed us the whole time. Others curved behind the trees, circling. They stopped in the exact spot where our point man vanished. One of the older rangers muttered about the land remembering old stories. He talked about hunters who walked the storms and took people without warning. I had heard fragments of similar tales from locals, but never gave them thought. Now those small stories weighed on me in a way I could not shake. We withdrew from the trees and continued toward the ridge, moving tighter and slower. The haze thinned a little as we reached higher ground. When we finally saw the crash site, it chilled me more than the cold. The aircraft lay half buried in a shallow bowl, its nose dipped, tail angled upward like it had settled rather than crashed. The fuselage showed dents but no tearing. No long scar in the snow behind it. No sign of impact. It looked placed there, set down by large hands. The metal skin carried odd ripples like heat had worked it long ago. When I placed my glove against it, the surface felt colder than the air, almost sharp with cold. We searched the interior. The cockpit windows were frosted opaque from the inside. Instruments sat dead, needles pointing in random directions. One panel carried circular rust marks, though rust should not grow that fast in such cold. A few small bones lay scattered near the tail section. They looked picked clean, too clean for scavengers. Some were old, dry, and sunken. Others looked newer, still holding the faint structure of marrow. The mix of ages made no sense. Outside, the lieutenant kept that private radio close to his ear. I watched him nod at something none of us could hear. His breath puffed out in steady clouds, too steady for a man who had just lost one of his soldiers. When I stepped closer, he closed the notebook he had been writing in and turned away. The weather shifted again as we moved out. Cloud cover slid over the sky, dimming the light until the valley looked washed and gray. I heard a soft, rhythmic pulse in my radio. It rose, faded, then rose again. Every time it grew stronger, the ground under my boots delivered a faint tremor. Something moved out there, matching our pace. We formed a tight column, spread just enough to avoid bunching. Shadows drifted between patches of fog. I could not tell if they were tricks of the light or something pacing us. The hair on the back of my neck lifted. Each breath came with a quiet sharpness, like the air itself watched. By late afternoon, we reached a small frozen creek. The sound of running water beneath the ice echoed through the valley. I knelt to refill a canteen and felt the hum again, a faint vibration coming through the ice. When I stood, one of the men pointed toward the tree line beyond the creek. A tall shape stood between two old spruces, long and thin, motionless. Its pale outline contrasted against the dark trees. I raised my rifle and blinked. The shape vanished without movement. No tracks marked the snow where it had been standing. The men shifted uneasily, checking their magazines, tightening straps, adjusting gloves. Fear can make small sounds seem loud. I felt every breath from the others around me. Night came early. The temperature dropped. We set camp on a small rise to see the ground better. The lieutenant placed us in a tight circle, as if expecting something. The sky darkened until the aurora shimmered faint above us. I tried to eat a ration bar, but the taste did not land. My mind stayed on the empty prints and the vanished man. As we settled in, the radio came alive. Not with static, with voices. Faint, thin, calling individual names. Voices that sounded like men we had served with for years. Voices of men already missing. They spoke from just beyond the tents, repeating the same quiet phrases, asking for help in familiar tones. But they were wrong. Something in the words did not fit human breath. The rhythm was too slow, too measured. We held our ground. No one left the perimeter. Still, the calls continued until the early hours, drifting through the cold like memories turned sharp. By morning, we knew we were being watched. And whatever watched us had grown bolder. We woke to a cold that felt heavier than the night before. The tents rattled softly as we packed up, each man moving slower than usual. No one talked about the voices we had heard. In the field, silence often means discipline. That morning, silence meant fear pressing down on every one of us. The lieutenant ordered a perimeter check before we moved. 2 rangers walked out to sweep the line. Only one returned. The other had left clear boot tracks that followed the arc of our established route, then veered slightly toward a drift shaped like a low hill. Those prints stopped beside a small stand of brush. Beyond that, the snow lay smooth and untouched. We fanned out around the area. A faint impression cut through the frost where something heavy had pressed down. Not a full print, more like the mark of a weight lowered from above. We found a torn glove, half frozen into the snow. No blood. No sign of a struggle. Only the sense that someone had reached down from the empty air and taken him before he could shout. A few yards away, we found a long, shallow groove running up the trunk of a birch tree, ending at a point nearly as high as the branches. The bark around the mark had a dull sheen, as if it had been heated and cooled in a single instant. None of us touched it. The lieutenant said we were moving out immediately. The men refused to split up anymore, so we tightened our formation. As we advanced through the valley, faint shades drifted between the trees. Nothing clear, nothing that stayed long enough to define. But the feeling of being watched grew sharper with every step. Around midday, we broke into a wide stretch of open ground. The sky stayed gray, but light echoed oddly across the snow, making the surface look uneven. We were halfway across when something moved on our right flank. Not the full shape, just a ripple in the snow, like a shadow sliding under ice. The corporal fired a warning shot. The sound cracked across the valley and vanished almost instantly, swallowed by the cold. The ripple paused, then shifted direction with sudden speed. I dropped to a knee and raised my rifle. Others followed, but nothing surfaced. Nothing approached. Nothing retreated. It simply flowed out of sight. We stayed low for a long moment, waiting for movement. When none came, we continued in short bursts, covering one another, expecting the ground itself to rise against us. The radio pulses came back, stronger this time. They beat in slow waves, each one settling into my ribs like a quiet knock. When we reached the next ridge, the lieutenant called a halt. He opened that small black notebook and scribbled something quickly. I stood close enough to see a sketch of the valley and a series of symbols along our path. I recognized none of them. When he noticed me looking, he snapped the book shut. His eyes were calm, almost steady, far steadier than they should have been after losing 2 men. We set up a brief rest on the ridge. The men breathed into their gloves and stamped their feet to keep circulation going. The cold had changed again. No wind, no drift. Just a deep quiet that stretched across the snow like a blanket. I turned a slow circle and checked every shadow. The feeling of being studied had grown strong enough to make my skin prickle under my layers. We moved on soon after. The terrain dipped into a narrow draw bordered by thick brush. The lieutenant pushed us through single file. Snow muffled every step. Halfway in, the brush on our left shifted. A thin outline flashed between branches. Pale. Tall. Too tall. The M60 opened up before I could lift my rifle. The gunner fired a long burst toward the shape. The snow exploded in a wide spray. A second outline moved behind the first, then slid out of sight. The gunner swung the barrel, but his hands shook. He whispered that he had hit something. I scanned the ground. No blood. No fragments. Only a single shallow print and a faint warm patch in the snow that melted at the edges. We regrouped and advanced out of the draw. Each man checked his ammo. My own magazine sat half full. I swapped it for a fresh one. The cold always eats at your fingers, and I felt the sting as metal brushed bare skin. The radio pulsed again. This time the static carried faint tones, almost like something trying to copy our signals. The rhythm felt too exact to be random. Another ranger, a quiet man with steady hands, stopped me and pointed toward the lieutenant. He held the private radio close to his ear, nodding again. His face held no grief, no anger, only a kind of distant calm. The private set reminded me of something unspoken during our briefing. Something that felt wrong now. Later that evening, we reached a small hollow between 2 low rises. We decided to stop and dig in for the night. Each man sank into his own thoughts, trying to settle nerves that refused to ease. The sun slipped behind the ridge, leaving only the faint aurora shimmering overhead. I took first watch. The radio hissed in dull pulses. I turned it down until it was barely audible. The snow around us reflected the pale green light, giving the whole hollow a dim glow. I scanned the edges, looking for movement. None came. Where my watch ended, I tried to sleep, but rest stayed out of reach. I heard shuffling from the lieutenant's tent. I opened my eyes and saw him scroll through pages in that small notebook, then reach into his pack for a folder he kept hidden. I shifted closer. When he stepped out to check the perimeter, I slipped inside. The folder held black and white photos, scenes that looked almost identical to ours. Broken stations, twisted metal, large prints in the snow. A typewritten page inside listed field interaction zones and coordinates that matched our patrol route. At the bottom, a short line read, "Test element expected at grid 4 near 7. Observation window remains open." My stomach tightened. We were not searching for a missing crew. We were part of a setup. I backed out of the tent and zipped it closed. The cold bit at my face. I looked at the men sleeping in their bags, unaware. The pulsing radio, the strange gear, the lieutenant's calm. It all fit together too neatly. Before dawn, a faint crunch in the snow pulled us all awake. A shadow slid past the edge of camp. Long, pale, almost human in shape. We raised rifles, but it drifted behind a snowbank and vanished without sound. We held position until the sky lightened. No one mentioned the shadow. No one needed to. We all felt it, and we all knew it was waiting. We broke camp before first light. The sky still carried traces of aurora, faint green strips moving slow across the darkness. Every man kept his rifle ready, eyes fixed on the tree line. No one trusted the stillness anymore. The snow felt too smooth, too untouched, as if everything that belonged in that valley had stepped aside to watch us. We followed a low ridge toward higher ground. The wind stayed unusually calm, sound carried far. Even our breathing felt loud. When the radio pulsed again, the rhythm changed. It came in short bursts, then one long tone that vibrated through my chest. The corporal checked his set and frowned. He said the signal was not random. The pattern was too clean, almost like a code. A few minutes later, another signal cut through our channel. Not static. Not a distress call. A clipped voice spoke a string of numbers and a short message. Test element remains in position. Observation will continue while assets hold. The voice did not use ranger terms. It did not sound surprised that we were still alive. It spoke like someone reading from a script. The lieutenant froze when he heard it. He reached for his private radio, stepped back a few paces, and whispered into it. His face stayed blank. I watched the men around me shift uneasily. They did not know about the folder I had seen, but they felt the wrongness pressing in. I moved up beside him. He pushed the radio into his coat, but not fast enough. I saw a short code on the screen, one I recognized from the folder. It matched the line about probable interaction along our path. He realized I had seen it. His jaw tightened. He finally spoke in a calm, steady voice. He said, "Command believes something dangerous lived in this valley. Something drawn to certain signals and frequencies. The weather station had activated a new radar mode weeks earlier. After that, the missing crew started reporting strange noises, pressure in the walls, and shapes near the drifts. When they went silent, Command decided to send in a unit with specific gear to confirm the pattern. We were that unit. He said we were not bait." His eyes give a different truth. Men do not keep secrets like that unless ordered to. And orders like that rarely care about the people who must carry them out. The men heard enough to understand. Anger moved through the group in a quiet wave. No one shouted. No one cursed. But the way hands tightened on rifles told me everything. A ranger's trust is built on simple things. Distance. Time. Shared cold. Shared danger. Once broken, it rarely returns. Before we could push the lieutenant for more, a sound rolled across the valley, not wind, not movement. A low vibration rising from the ground itself. Snow shifted in a slow ripple, as if something large moved beneath the surface. We formed a defensive line, rifles ready. The hum pressed harder, vibrating through my teeth until my head felt stuffed with pressure. The haze that had followed us for days thickened again, closing around the ridge. Then a pale outline appeared on the far slope, tall, long-limbed, still as a post. The shape watched us with a steadiness that made my chest tighten. It tilted its head in a slow, deliberate motion, as if studying our formation. The lieutenant whispered for us to hold fire. No one listened. A rifle cracked. The outline vanished. The snow at its feet exploded outward, as if something had burst into motion faster than our eyes could track. The hum surged in response, rising until the ridge felt alive beneath us. Whatever lived in that valley was not finished with us. The ridge fell silent after the shot. Snow settled in slow drifting flakes, almost gentle, as if the valley itself paused to listen. My breath clouded the air in short bursts. Every man scanned the slopes, waiting for the outline to return. Nothing moved. No wind, no sound. Only the low hum continued beneath our boots, steady and cold. Then the haze shifted. A thin curtain of white peeled back along the far side of the slope. For the first time since entering that valley, we saw the creature clearly. It stood taller than any man, its limbs long and narrow, joints set at angles that felt wrong for anything that walked upright. Its skin looked pale, almost colorless, blending with the snow except for faint lines that traced along its sides. And its eyes reflected the fading aurora, catching the green light and holding it even though the sky had gone gray. It did not rush us. It studied us. The M60 gunner fired first. A controlled burst. The round struck. I saw the impacts ripple across its frame, bending the creature slightly but not dropping it. It moved backward with a strange fluid motion, almost thoughtful. Blood spilled across the snow, dark at first, then turning thin and watery as it hit the cold. Where it touched metal from the crashed aircraft behind us, small rust spots formed as if the metal aged in seconds. The men tightened their circle. The hum in the ground shifted. It rose in a slow wave, climbing up through our legs into our chests. The sound blunted my thoughts, pressing against them until each breath felt heavy. For a moment, I thought I saw another outline near the tree line, smaller, moving in a rhythm that matched the pulse in the radio. When I blinked, it vanished. The creature retreated into the haze without a sound. Not defeated. Not wounded in any way that slowed it. More like it had gathered what it needed. A measure of our strength. A sense of our weapons. And it waited for the next moment to test us again. We pulled back toward a narrow cut in the ridge where an old mining trail once ran. The lieutenant said we needed shelter, something with solid walls that could break the creature's sight. We followed him because there was no better choice. Even the men who distrusted him understood that open ground would only help the thing hunt us faster. The trail led to a small mouth in the rock, a tunnel carved by prospectors years before, long abandoned. The air inside felt warmer, but only slightly. I stepped into the dark and felt the hum weaken under my boots. The others noticed it too. The rock dulled the vibration. My shoulders eased for the first time in days. We moved deeper, setting a small lantern near the entrance. The tunnel widened into a narrow chamber. Dust coated the floor. Old wooden supports leaned at tired angles. The men took positions, facing the entrance, rifles ready. No one spoke, above a whisper. Once we settled, the echoes started, not loud, not sharp. Slow taps on stone, evenly spaced, like footsteps beyond our light. Then faint breaths, soft and steady, matching our own pace a moment behind. A trick of the cave, maybe. But the timing stayed too constant, too deliberate. When one man inhaled, a second breath followed from the dark. When someone shifted, the echo shifted as though mimicking him. The lieutenant checked his private radio again. A single tone pulsed from it, steady and calm. He turned it off for the first time since the mission started. That told me more than anything he had said earlier. I looked around at the men huddled in that narrow space. Their faces held fear, anger, and exhaustion, all mixed together. We had lost 2 men already, and the valley felt like it wanted the rest. The hum outside the tunnel softened, almost like the creature moved farther away. But I felt no relief. It had learned something in that short clash, and I knew it would come again, smarter than before. That was when I made a quiet decision. I would destroy the equipment that kept us marked, the special radios, the sensor packs, everything drawing that thing closer. Even if the lieutenant fought me on it, I would do it. Because if we stayed within the signals it followed, none of us would leave that valley alive. We left the tunnel before first light. The lantern had burned low, and the air inside had grown close and heavy. The echoes had followed us through most of the night, copying every breath and shift in a slow, steady rhythm. No one slept. When the lieutenant finally ordered us out, most of us moved without a word, eager for open ground, even if danger waited there. Snow fell in thin flakes that barely touched the ground before freezing into small crystals. The sky above the valley glowed with a faint line of green, a leftover trace of the aurora. The hum under our boots returned the moment we stepped outside. Not strong at first, just enough to remind us the creature had not forgotten us. We headed toward the weather station. It stood as the only structure we knew, and we wanted walls again. The lieutenant said we would fortify it and hold until we could reach an extraction point. No one argued. We were too cold, too tired, and too aware of the eyes watching us from the slopes. The walk back felt shorter than the walk out, though the distance had not changed. That bothered me. I checked my watch often. I counted steps. I tracked the rhythm of our pace. None of it matched the way the valley narrowed around us. It felt like we were being pulled toward the station, as if the land wanted us there. When we reached it, the building looked even more damaged than before. Metal panels had bent inward, as if pressed by a heavy force. Snow filled the gaps in the walls. The broken door lay half buried. Inside, the air felt colder than the world outside. No one said it out loud, but we all sensed we were stepping back into a place marked by the creature. We worked fast. We placed claymores along the western and northern sides where the snowbanks created blind spots. We stretched wire across the weak points in the wall and stacked crates against the windows. The M60 set up near the doorway with a clear line of fire. The corporal handled the satchel charges, setting them near likely breach points. The injured ranger, the one hurt during the earlier confusion, lay near a corner wrapped in blankets. His face looked pale and thin, as if the cold had drained him from the inside. He kept whispering that something stood near the windows. We checked each one. Nothing waited outside. Still, the feeling stayed sharp. By late afternoon, the storm arrived. It rolled in thick from the north, swallowing the valley in heavy white. The wind hammered the walls. Snow crashed against the roof in sudden bursts. The hum under the building grew louder, rising and falling in slow waves. My teeth hurt from the vibration. As the storm deepened, shapes flickered at the edge of sight. Not full outlines, only pieces. A long arm passing behind a drift. A thin shadow sliding across the roof. The wind did not explain those movements. These shapes moved with purpose. At dusk, the creature tested our perimeter. A faint scrape along the western wall. A soft shift near the doorframe. The corporal froze beside the claymores, ready to trigger them. The lieutenant stood near the window, gripping his rifle as if bracing for impact. The scrape came again, louder this time. Snow sifted down from the ceiling. The hum deepened, rattling crates against the wall. One of the men fired a burst through the far window. The flash lit the storm in a brief glow. Nothing fell. Nothing fled. but the hum rose sharply after the shot, as if answering. Then the roof creaked, not from snow weight, from pressure. I looked up and saw a faint sag in the beams, bending under something heavy. Another ranger fired upward on instinct. The rounds punched through wood and vanished into the dark. A long, pale shape shifted along the roofline, its movement slow and deliberate. "Prepare positions," the lieutenant whispered. The creature struck a moment later. The western wall bowed inward, as if gripped by two long hands. Wood cracked. Wire snapped. The corporal triggered the first claymore. The blast shook the station. Snow sprayed inward. The pressure vanished, replaced by a faint rust-like smell drifting through the hole. Before we could reset, the eastern window burst inward. A pale limb shot through the opening, sweeping across the crates. The M60 roared. The gunner held the trigger down, hammering the window until the limb slipped away into the storm. Dark fluid splattered across the floor. The injured ranger cried out, covering his ears as if the sound hurt more than the cold. Lightning flickered far above the valley, turning the swirling snow green for a heartbeat. In that instant, I saw the creature's outline against the storm. Tall, bent, watching, learning our response. The next breach came at the door. A sharp impact tore the hinges free. Snow poured inside. The lieutenant stepped forward to fire, but the pressure behind the door grew too strong. The frame buckled. A long, pale shade forced its way through the gap. The corporal threw a satchel charge into the breach. Before the creature could pull back, he lunged forward and slammed his shoulder into the doorframe, trapping the charge against the opening. He looked at me once, steady and calm. Then he pulled the pin. The explosion ripped through the station. The blast threw me backward. The air filled with splinters and snow. The entire western side of the building tore open. The lieutenant's private radio cracked against the floor and shattered. The hum cut in half for a moment, then resumed at a lower, angrier pitch. When the smoke cleared, the corporal was gone. The breach lay open to the storm. The creature had been driven back, but not destroyed. We were alive. Fewer than before, shaken, low on ammo, frozen to the bone, and the storm outside was still building. The creature would return. We all felt it. The blast left the station shaking. Dust floated through the air in slow drifting specks. My ears rang, but under that ringing I still heard the hum, steady and low, as if the valley itself breathed around us. Snow blew through the broken wall, coating the floor in a thin white sheet. The men moved carefully, stepping around debris, checking each other for wounds. We had lost another ranger, and the weight of it hung heavy in that ruined room. The lieutenant leaned against a support beam. Blood ran down his sleeve where a splinter of wood had cut deep. His face looked pale in the lantern light, but he stayed steady. He ordered us to gather supplies and prepare for a retreat. No one questioned him. The station could not hold another attack. The creature had tested our defenses. It would not repeat the same approach. We packed quickly. Extra ammo, food, radios, anything useful. The injured ranger could barely stand, but two men helped him to his feet. His breath came short and he whispered that something stood outside the open wall. I looked, but saw only drifting snow. Still, I felt watched. By the time we stepped outside, the storm had shifted to a heavy curtain, thick enough to make shapes blur even a few yards away. We moved down the slope toward the frozen lake that cut across the route to the backup extraction point. The lieutenant said the ice would let us cross faster. I wondered if it would also expose us more. The hum changed as soon as we reached the lake edge. It grew sharper, almost like a quiet warning. Cracks ran across the ice in thin, spidering lines, some new, some old. We stepped carefully, spacing our weight. Snow blew across the frozen surface in long, smooth waves. I kept scanning the edges of the lake. The tree line shifted in slow, drifting shadows. Halfway across, the ice groaned, a deep sound rising from far beneath. We froze. The injured ranger stumbled, and his helpers tightened their grip. A wide crack opened behind us, thin at first, then splitting into a narrow, dark line that stretched toward the center of the lake. No water rose, only darkness. Something moved under the ice. A shadow slid just beneath the surface, long and shifting. Then another, and another. One moved in a slow arc toward us. The hum rose in time with the movement. For a moment, the ice under my boots vibrated as if something brushed against it from below. We spread out, moving faster but still careful. The storm thinned for a moment, and I fired a flare into the sky. Its orange glow lit the lake in a wide halo. In that brief light, I saw the shapes clearly. Not three, not five, many. pale forms stretched below the ice like shadows that did not belong to any creature I knew. Some were small, some long, some bent in ways that felt impossible. The flare sputtered, dying fast. Darkness returned. The hum deepened again. We quickened our pace. The lieutenant whispered that we needed to reach the rocks ahead, where the ice met the ridge. Once there, we could set charges and seal off the creature's path. It was the only plan we had left. The ice cracked sharply to our right. A long, pale limb punched through the surface, breaking upward in a spray of frozen shards. One ranger fired. The shot sparked off the ice. The limb slid back under, moving toward us with sudden speed. Another crack tore open behind us. The injured man collapsed, dropping to his knees. His helpers tried lifting him. The ice under him buckled. I grabbed him by his parka and pulled hard, dragging him toward firmer ground. His breath came in weak gasps. His eyes were fixed on the dark water below, as if he saw something none of us could. We neared the rocky edge. The snow piled high against the mountain base. Small boulders jutted out in sharp angles where we could take cover. I reached into my pack for the last set of charges. My fingers shook from cold and fear. I could feel the hum rising through the ice, climbing up my legs and settling in my chest. The creature chose that moment to rise. The ice shattered 10 yards behind us. A tall, pale form burst through, sending shards flying in all directions. It grabbed one ranger by the shoulder and pulled him down before anyone could react. The water swallowed him without sound. His rifle clattered once against the ice, then slid toward the hole. We fired everything we had left. Rounds tore into the creature's frame. It jerked with each impact, but kept moving forward. Its limbs were too long, its shoulders too narrow, its steps too precise. The dark fluid leaking from its wounds steamed in the cold. Where it touched the ice, thin cracks spread outward, like frost chasing heat. I shouted for the men to pull back along the rocks. Two covered our retreat while I planted the charges along the weak line of ice at the water's edge. Snow whipped against my face. My gloves stiffened from the cold. I pressed the detonators into place with numb fingers. The creature reached the edge of the rocks, its limbs dragging across stone with slow scraping motions. Its eyes glowed faintly in the stormlight, reflecting the dying aurora above. I lifted my rifle and fired the last of my magazine directly into its chest. The recoil bit into my shoulder. The creature staggered, but did not fall. The hum peaked. I hit the detonator. The ice collapsed in a wide roar. A wave of snow and broken shards rolled over the rocks. The creature dropped into the widening gap as the lake fractured beneath it. I saw it fall, limbs twisting, reaching for the edge. Then, the entire shelf of ice gave way, dragging it into the dark water below. The collapse spread faster than I expected. The ground under me cracked open. I fell sideways, sliding into a newly formed crevasse. Cold air rushed past me. For a heartbeat, I saw a cavern below the ice, full of frozen shapes. Some small, some tall, some curled around each other like nesting shadows. Bones lay scattered across the frozen floor far below, old and new mixed together. A hand caught my wrist. One of the last rangers held me with both hands, planting his boots against the rock. He pulled with every ounce of strength he had left. I kicked against the crumbling edge and felt my weight shift upward. Together, we crawled away from the collapsing ice as the crevasse sealed behind us under falling snow. The storm swallowed the sound of the lake falling apart. The hum faded into a dull, distant vibration. I looked back once before the wind thickened the air again. No shapes moved below the broken ice. We climbed the last few yards to the extraction point. My lungs burned with cold. My legs felt heavy. The survivor beside me barely kept his balance. We had no ammo left, no supplies worth counting, only the will to reach higher ground. An unmarked helicopter arrived near dusk. Its crew wore no insignia. They asked no questions. They pulled us aboard, gave us blankets, checked our pulse, and handed us vials of something clear. None of them met our eyes. As we lifted off, the valley looked empty again. Still, untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. But the hum stayed in my bones long after the rotor wash faded. They flew us straight to Elmendorf. No patch, no unit name. Just a cold room with bright lights and men who spoke without giving theirs. They asked careful questions about distance, speed, sound, and shape. Not a word about the men we lost, not a word about blame or comfort. Only numbers, only details. I answered what I could. My hands shook from the cold still sitting in them. One man in a gray coat wrote fast, crossing out anything that did not fit whatever story they already believed. When I mentioned the cavern under the ice, he stopped writing and asked me to repeat the part about the hum instead. He did not want truth. He wanted pieces he could fit in a report. They kept us under observation for several days. Needles, scans, quiet notes exchanged behind glass. My memories blurred together, but I remember the smell of disinfectant and the way the lights hummed just a little too close to the same rhythm I had felt in that valley. When they finally released us, our official statements were already typed for us. Short, clean, safe. Nothing about the creature. Nothing about the missing men taken whole. Nothing about the ice breaking beneath us. Only an unexpected weather event and training casualties. We signed because refusing would trap us there even longer. I walked out of that building with one other ranger beside me, the last survivor. He looked thinner than before, worn down by something deeper than fear. I felt the same weight in myself, settling low and steady. The valley was behind us now, but something in me knew it was not finished. I left the army a few years later. The cold stayed in my bones longer than any winter. I tried to settle into normal life, but nights were never fully quiet. Sometimes, when a house pipe vibrated or a train passed far off, I felt that same low hum rise through the floor and into my chest. It always faded, but it never felt harmless. The other surviving ranger moved south. He wrote me once, saying he still woke thinking something stood at the edge of his yard. Months later, news reached me that he died alone in a wooded area. They blamed exposure, even though the weather had been mild. I saw his body before burial. There was a faint chemical smell in his clothes, the same scent that drifted through the station after the creature's blood hit metal. I kept track of missing person reports in Alaska. Too many lined up along old patrol routes and forgotten coordinates. Some near places marked as closed training areas. Some near valleys without names. I stopped counting. I know what we saw. I know what hunted us. And I know someone else knew long before we arrived. That valley did not take all of us, but it never let us go either. I'm an old man now, and most winters pass quietly, yet that valley still walks with me. I remember each step we took, each breath in the cold, each man we lost. Time should soften things, but some memories stay sharp. I think the mind holds on when it knows the truth matters more than comfort. I tell the story the same way I lived it. Calm, straight, no grand claims. Only what I saw and what I felt under my boots. I do not pretend to know what that creature was. I do not know if it belonged to the land, or something older, or something made by hands that should have known better. All I know is that it moved with purpose, hunted with patience, and watched with a kind of intelligence that felt colder than the air around it. Looking back, the strangest part was not the fear. Soldiers learned to live with fear. It was the silence from the people above us, the way they bent the story before we even returned to base, the way they cared more about measurements and patterns than the men who never came home. They treated it like a study, not a loss. I still hear the hum sometimes, not often, just enough to remind me that some places do not forget the people who entered them. Some places remain awake long after you leave. When I close my eyes, I see the creature's pale outline in the storm and the dark shapes under the ice, waiting in that frozen cavern for something to stir them again. If there is one thing I hold on to after all these years, it is this. The Alaska Triangle is not empty land. It is not untouched wilderness. It carries old things beneath its snow, and some of them listen when we bring our signals and machines and noise into their quiet world. So if you ever see a sign that says restricted area or closed range, do not test it. Do not step past it for adventure or curiosity. Some ground is marked for a reason. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And for more amazing horror stories, just click the ones showing right now on your screen.